here, the Frugal Crafter. I've been asked a lot about how to make my own chalk paint, so I thought today I would experiment a bit and see if I could come up with something that would work for you. So here is some examples of the chalk paint that I made. Here is just the paint on its own, and here is how I turned it into chalk paint. So I've got a red, and then you can see it turns more to like a matte, not really a pink, but like a matte kind of, I don't know, dusty brick kind of color. The pink goes into a nice pastel opaque pink. The yellow goes into a nice pastel opaque yellow, and the green, which I mixed with the green, white, and a little bit of yellow to get the right color that I wanted. Then it went to like that nice soft pastel green. So what I used was this very inexpensive craft paint from Joann's. Now I was kind of bummed when I bought this. I bought it for some kids classes, but it was really transparent and the quality wasn't very good. But it was very inexpensive. It was like a $1.60 or something like that, regular price for each of these. So that's what I'm going to use. Now if you're going to use more expensive paint, you're not going to need as much of the next ingredient, which is Plaster of Paris, and this is very inexpensive. You can get this at any hardware store, or you might even have some around your house. So what we're going to do is work on just some surface you can mix your paint in. You could use like recycled applesauce cups, or you know, recycled baby food jars, whatever you have, or you could even mix right into your bottle of paint if you had a larger project to do. But since I'm just going to kind of mix this up and swatch it out, I'm going to work right here on my my Stay Wet palette. So first, what I want to do is just squeeze out some paint, and I'm not making a huge amount because I just want enough to swatch it out. So I've got probably like oh, maybe like, I don't know, a teaspoon of paint, maybe half a teaspoon. I'm not 100% sure there, just a little bit. And this is something that's not exact science. And like I said, if you're using you know, better quality paint, you're not going to need quite so much Plaster of Paris. This is quite a thin craft paint. So I'm just getting out some colors, some basic colors here. And let's do this green. Why don't I could do this actually without any white, and we can see the colors that it makes just on its own. And so then what I want to do, I'm just going to wipe off this palette knife here. I find a palette knife is really good for scooping out the Plaster of Paris. It's I would say, like, if that's how much paint I have, I would say you have probably a quarter of the amount of Plaster of Paris to the amount of paint that you have. That's probably a little much, so I might need to add a little more paint to that. So it's about a quarter of the amount of Plaster of Paris. So if you had like a 4-ounce bottle of paint, you could pour out a quarter of that and then fill it with Plaster of Paris. Just make sure you have enough room that you can like shake it up. But I'm going to use this palette knife for mixing since you know, since I'm just making up a little bit here on the palette. So you need to pay attention to the consistency of the paint. And that's the same whether you're, you know, shaking it in a bottle and mixing it that way. So if you're doing this in a bottle, what I think I would recommend is adding a little bit of Plaster of Paris and then seeing how that dissolves into the paint. And if it still looks really thin, you can add a little bit more. Like, I think that could take a little bit more. I'm just going to scrape some of that extra over since I knew the purple had too much. And you want to make sure you get kind of like a mayonnaise consistency, I guess is what I call it, or mustard in this case because it's yellow. But you know, you want kind of that consistency, and you don't want to see any chunky bits. It shouldn't look gritty. You want it to be nice and smooth. Alright, I'm just going to wipe off my palette knife and go over to the green because, you know, yellow's an ingredient in green. I'm not, you know, this is close enough. I'm not, this is just something I'm going to swatch out on a piece of scrap cardboard in a second. Like, that dissolved really quick, so I feel like I could do a little bit more plaster in there. It's basically a 1/4 Plaster of Paris to 3/4 paint. For like, and I would recommend using the craft paint or even some house paint over using the heavy-bodied artist quality paint there. That's got a pretty good consistency there. I'm going to wipe off my palette knife, go to the next color. Maybe I'll go over to pink here. You just keep mixing it up. Like, this is just about right. You know, it's not dissolving right away. I have to work at it a little bit, but it's not remaining really chunky. And I would test out a little bit before you commit a whole bottle to it. So if like you're wondering how this is going to look and you're considering painting like a bureau or something, I would definitely make a small amount first and then go, if you like it, go to the bigger one. Now this is the one that I said, remember I said I put too much? I dropped too much in there. you can see when you have too much in there, look what it does. It just kind of like, it's almost like working a dough, trying to get, you know, a dough mixed up or some heavy icing. Plus I think I've got some dried paint on my palette underneath there. So see, you've got this kind of more of like a heavy paste there. So if you get that, it's not a big deal. Just add another drop of paint. That might even be too much paint, but we'll mix that in, we'll see. And then by swatching it out on something that's colored, like a piece of cardboard or, you know, something that's got a coat of paint on it, you'll be able to see how opaque it is. Alright, do that last color. This is highly entertaining, isn't it? Oh my goodness, 5 minutes into the video, we're still mixing paint. Wow. Pin it on Pinterest, people. Pin it on Pinterest. Thumbs up if you like homemade art supplies. I do. Alright, that one even looks to me like it could take a little bit more. See how quickly it dissolved? But I think if you see me mixing this, it's gonna be the next best thing to actually trying it yourself and figuring out what you need. Because if you're like, oh, that's too thin, when you go to mix yours, you'll be like, oh yeah, when Lindsay's looked like this, she added a little bit more. So you'll have that information. And the thing to remember, everything looks nice and vivid and bright right here. But let me just show you, that red is going to dry that color. Okay, that pink is going to dry that color. So there's going to be a severe shift later when these dry. Alright, I'm going to pause it and grab a scrap of cardboard. Okay, so I just grabbed like the flap off of a box here, and a wicked fancy, huh? And I'm just going to brush out the paint on its own. Now that was the paint right from the tube. Okay, I don't know if you can really tell, but it's very thin. Okay, then I'm just going to grab some of the homemade paint that we just did, that same color. So already you can see how much the plaster has made that lighter and more opaque. You can see how you can really see the texture of the cardboard through there. So what I'm going to do here is just go through with each color and swatch it out so you can see how it changes. So this is a really good situation or solution for me, because I bought this paint and I was very disappointed in how transparent and watery it was, but now I'm able to put it in a way that I could use it, so you could see how much more opaque that green is. Again, I'm just cleaning my brush off in between. Also, it's a good idea to dry your brush off before you go into paint. Like when you're painting and you rinse your brush off, always dry it off before you go in. Otherwise, you dilute your paint a lot. Look how thin and watery that yellow is. I almost feel like I need to scrape some of that off. All right, now I'm just gonna pick up some of that yellow. That's also still a little watery. It might need a little white, but it's still a heck of a lot better than it was originally. I'm not sure if I'm crazy about chalk paint. I mean, I certainly like this better than how that paint was originally, but it does kind of gives me that, well, it gives me that fingernails on a chalkboard feeling, you know, that heebie-jeebie. I don't like the feel of that paint. Like when I touch it after it dries, it just feels so, well, chalky. And there, that's a big improvement. But I know it's really popular, and I think you could actually make your own chalkboard walls. Like if you want to paint an area of your wall with this, you could use it for a chalkboard, which is kind of cool. And we'll do this red one here. Again, this is really watery. So if you have like Delta Ceramcoat or Folk Art or Americana, one of those finer craft paints, you probably won't need so much because it's already going to be more opaque. But, you know, play it by ear. You just want to make sure that you avoid the chunks. Alright, now I am going to let this dry and we're going to come back and look at it again. But before I do that, I'm just going to set it right down. I got my space heater on because it's very cold, so I'm just going to set it underneath my my desk where my space heater is. But I wanted to show you these because I'm actually going to be using these in a tutorial in a day or two. I just really like the way it looks, but I can kind of go through and tell you what ones came out better and what ones came out worse. So like if I look here, I can kind of see where I didn't mix it up very well, and I've got these little bumps. You don't want that. You want to make sure you mix it up really well before you go to brush it on. I think I had attempted to mix it with my brush instead of my palette knife, and I got that. I think the red came out pretty well. That's nice, uniform, flat finish. If you were going to use this for a chalkboard, I think I would paint it on like a a scrap of plywood, I would give it one coat with the brush strokes going this way, then I do a coat with the brush strokes going this way or horizontally, then I do another vertical one, and I would let it probably cure for a week or so just to be on the safe side. And then I think you'd have a really nice chalkboard surface. You could do that with black or green and be traditional, or whatever color you want. And if you want to emulate more of like a milk paint look, if you rubbed this with like maybe a hunk of wax, you would get that subtle sheen. Or maybe if you rubbed it with a little cabinet wax or bush, well, that's not called cabinet wax, that's the wax paper stuff, but like some sort of finishing wax, I think that would give you that kind of casein paint look, which is also kind of popular with traditional finishes. I'm going to pause this, I'm going to just let that dry, and then I'm going to show you how our paint turned out at the end. Okay, now we can see the complete shift from wet to dry, and you can see that our chalk paints are really opaque and bright and pastel-y, just really rich colors, very Eastery. I love it. And the traditional acrylic paint, which, like I said, was a very low quality, and I hate to say low quality, I mean it's definitely like kind of a low-end craft paint that I got at Joann's, but it's fine for this purpose. I don't want to like, I mean it is what it is. It's cheap paint. Don't hate me if you love that paint. It's just not, it's worth every penny I paid for it, but not a cent more. So you can see how I have a much nicer finish and opacity to the homemade chalk paint. So I wanted to try something else. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to try actually writing on these? So I grabbed a stick of white chalk, and I thought I would do this on my first prototype that, you know, but look at that, you could totally write on that. Isn't that fun? I don't know how well it would erase because I just painted this like an hour ago, so it might not have cured enough, but maybe I'll just, oh yeah, look at that, you could totally erase that. Oh my gosh, okay, game changer, my life has changed. I'm totally gonna play with this idea some more, but I wanted to share that with you. I hope you find it useful. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you like this tutorial, and share it with your friends so they don't go waste all kinds of money on chalk paint. They can make it themselves. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.